Welcome to Packolution. In this podcast series, you'll hear the experts of the packaging industry talking about sustainability and the future of packaging. It is brought to you by Watron and hosted by one of its founders, Michaela Wachtel, and Sales Director Ton Kniepscher.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Packolution, the podcast series by Watron. And as a guest today, we have Professor Achim Grefenstein. Welcome. Achim, maybe you can give some information on who you are, because not everybody may know you.
Yeah, my name is Achim Grefenstein. I'm working since more than 8 years for Constantia Flexibles, one of the world's biggest manufacturer of flexible packaging, and I'm responsible here for the area of R&D for the Constantia Group.
And rumor has it that you are quite a busy man. Could you please name some of your professional activities other than your day job at Constantia and how these relate to your day job?
Yeah, during my whole industrial business career, I have a so-called hobby job. I'm calling it, it's a professorship and lecturing on plastics, compounding and recycling at my former university of the RWTH Aachen.
Okay.
And these days that hobby fits better than ever with my real job, as you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's only so many hours in the day, right?
Yes, sometimes the hours are a little bit limited, but beside of that, I have also some other jobs to do, which are related to the actual challenges in the circular economy. We as Constantia and I in person have joined also the Recyclers initiative of the European Plastic Recyclers organization and be involved here in the technical committee for polyolefin film recycling and in the technical advisory board. Since at the end, we only can manage it as a whole value chain. And last but not least, for the European packaging converters, since beginning of 2020, I'm here chairman for the plastics division. So I'm hearing also some of the future initiatives in Brussels quite early. It's also interesting.
I can imagine. So this makes us even more honored that you have taken the time to talk to us now. So we will make sure to keep the pace. So thank you.
Of course, we did some research before we're doing this podcast today. And I read on the homepage from Constantia Flexibles the slogan, 100% of our consumer and pharma packaging will be recyclable by 2025. So this is a really ambitious goal. How is Constantia going to realize this goal?
Yes, that is indeed a challenging task. You have to keep in mind that we are dealing with several thousands of different specifications, and we are not dealing with the various plastic materials. We are coming from aluminium. We are producing since more than 100 years aluminium packaging. We are working with paper, and very often, as also all other peers in our industry over decades, we have optimized the structures by minimizing material consumption by combining aluminium, paper and plastics in many specifications. If you think only about, for example, a butter wrapper, which is a laminate of paper and aluminium. What we are doing now is to optimize the packaging so that we look what is the main material and how can we maximize the amount of the main material and minimize the required barrier materials and other functional layers so that they do not harm the recycling of the main component.
And what material does Constantia prefer to work with other than aluminium?
So at the end, we have no clear preference. And in the meantime, after we have acquired over the years many companies dealing mostly with plastics packaging, we are producing today more plastics tonnage than aluminium, much more. Also, the amount of paper is increasing, especially in the recent time. So that means we have no preference. It really depends on the application.
And so it goes into a fit-for-purpose situation again.
Yes, it goes into a fit-of-purpose situation. And if we talk about plastics, of course, we are dealing with monopolyethylene and monopropylene with a certain preference on polyethylene. Why? Here we have, not only in Europe, but also in many other countries around the world, and we are a global company, we have established recycling streams for polyethylene. And we have learned that even in India, where we have a strong footprint, polyethylene is recycled as only flexible material there. And therefore, for many applications, we prefer to work with polyethylene, but of course, polypropylene for packaging with higher stiffness, higher thermal resistance, etc., is an indispensable material for flexible packaging.
And you already mentioned the topic recycling. Recycling is a really big issue. And there are, of course, different means of recycling. I also know that this is an issue. What is the best means of recycling? So I would like to ask you the following question. What is, in your opinion, the superior way of recycling? Is it the mechanical or is it the chemical way?
It is clearly the mechanical recycling. Why? Mechanical recycling is a much less energy consumptive technology, and therefore, for good reason, politics in the European Commission, they clearly prefer that, and in most European countries, or almost all European countries, with the exception of UK, in the meantime, the recycling quota are just counting the mechanical recycling. Chemical recycling is much more energy intensive, since you need high temperatures to crack down the polymers to their components, to oils and waxes. And what many people do not have on the radar, also chemical recycling needs a proper design for recycling. And physics are not changing. I'm thinking back to my time at the University of Aachen, when in my working group, in my PhD time, and also my peers here, we have worked for the German Ministry of Environment in the 90s. In order to investigate mechanical and chemical recycling routes when the green dot system was installed there. And we have clearly seen the more polluted the polyolefin stream is with other polymers, the more energy consumptive the chemical recycling becomes.
You mentioned a design for recycling. What criteria do packaging designers need to take into account for this recyclable packaging?
Yeah, the design for recycling, there are different guidelines on design for recycling. The most prominent is the CFLEX initiative, where Constantia is also a founding member. CFLEX means Circular Economy for Flexible Packaging, a value chain approach of the flexible packaging industry. And the second is the Recyclers initiative, where also, beside of the recyclers, members from the whole value chain, the big resin companies, the ink manufacturers, adhesive manufacturers, and of course, converting companies like Constantia are members. And the latter one, the Recyclers, in the meantime, has a very well-defined design guideline with a clear rating according to a energy efficiency standard. You rate a packaging from A, perfect recyclable, to F, non-recyclable, based on defined criteria. And we are doing permanently scientific studies, how much percent of another polymer can be tolerated within the main polymer. And therefore, thresholds for allowed amounts of barrier polymers like EVOH are clearly defined in the meantime.
And now we talked about recycling. I would like to go back to Constantia as a company itself. Most flexible packaging companies have mission statements on sustainability. I'm interested in, how does Constantia differentiate itself from other companies that also have a mission statement on sustainability? Yeah,
of course, if you read the websites of many companies, you have the impression they are all writing the same. Maybe the main differentiation in our case is that we started quite early with our sustainability journey. We have already, since 12, 13 years, clear goals on carbon footprint reduction. And in the meantime, we have also a science-based target for global warming, what we try to achieve. And secondly, we started also our monomaterial recycling journey earlier than most other companies. Why? We have invested 2013 in India and have acquired first one company. In the meantime, in total, we have 8 sites in India. And in India, years before the European politicians have discussed about recyclability, they have discussed to ban all multi-layer packaging. And therefore, based on that, our basic R&D, which was started in my department then, was continued in customer projects with global brands dealing with us in India. And therefore, we started, thanks to our Indian initiative, a little bit earlier. And we have also shown commitment over there. In the meantime, the total ban in India has not been realized. They are going more into a system like in Europe with some incentives for recyclable packaging. Nevertheless, we have invested there in 2019 in a plant which is completely designed to produce recyclable mono PE packaging. And that's the world's first plant of its kind.
I have an additional question on recycling. Plastic, is that still food grade allowed, or does it need to go down in the value chain?
Yeah, that's another good question. We have already discussed that about the role of mechanical and chemical recycling. And you are absolutely right. Today, food-approved grades in mechanical recycling are only available in the polyester bottle industry, and in HDPE bottles in UK, there's one exception here. But in the vast majority of household collected mixed polyolefin plastics, mechanical recycling can today not give food approved grades. Here, chemical recycling is today the only workable solution. But if I look into the recycling technologies, also mechanical, the so-called advanced mechanical recycling technologies like dissolution technologies, etc., might allow in future to create food approved recyclates.
Yeah, because that way we can, of course, keep the value in the chain as well. So that would be the only way to approach a good recycling system for the whole industry.
Yes, of course. We have no other choice. We need all. We need the best possible design for recycling, and we need continuous investments in further recycling capacity, but also in new technologies and better recyclate quality.
And how do you, as Constantia, support your customers with making sustainable choices? Are there guidelines you provide to your customers, to the converters?
Yeah, of course. We have created a product range we call the Packolutions, means our recyclable, sustainable packaging options. And we have here 4 mainstreams. It's, of course, aluminium, it's polyethylene, polypropylene, and it's paper. And a 5th smaller side stream, which is for us more a niche product, are biodegradables. And of course, we consider us as a full range supplier. We are not material depending, and therefore we try to consult our customers as neutral as possible from a material independent perspective, so that at the end the customer gets a material which fits for this application the best.
Can you allude a bit on the biodegradable? Because this is quite a fascinating topic, biodegradable, because it's not always and everywhere allowed. In certain regions it is the standard almost, and in certain other regions it's not allowed. Can you shed some light on that from your experience?
Yeah, that's another good question. Here we have clearly first to clarify that many people are mixing bio-based and biodegradable. Right. Bio-based you can have for all resins, also the recyclable mass resins like polyester, polyethylene, polypropylene can be bio-based and will be bio-based. Here I'm sure. Concerning the biodegradables, what many people do not have on the radar is, first of all, that biodegradables are not degrading under all conditions, especially in marine environment. It is very difficult for plastic to degrade, even for biodegradables. Most need industrial composting and thus collection. So that means biodegradation is not a mean against littering. First point. Second point, what most people have not on the radar is that biodegradable plastics are not creating compost as itself. The compost is only created by the foodstuff. The packaging degrades to the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, and under anaerobic conditions also even methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. And therefore, it is no good idea to have biodegradables wherever. Biodegradables, for good reasons, also in the latest proposals of the European Commission, should be used only in niche applications where they help to collect food waste. If I look to our portfolio, we are not producing garbage bags or bags to collect bio waste in your household. That's not our product, but we are working with coffee capsules. And a plastic coffee capsule you can hardly mechanically recycle, since the polypropylene would be contaminated with too much coffee powder. But a biodegradable capsule could be, if working properly, a good solution beside of aluminium capsules, where the recycling is not influenced by the coffee powder, which is, as organic substance, is used to remelt the aluminium.
I have another question, which is a little bit off the topic from recycling from my point of view and talking about plastics, because your company is also doing aluminium packaging, from what I heard. Now, I'm a normal consumer. From my point of view, aluminium packaging is not very sustainable, but maybe I'm wrong here. Probably I'm wrong here. Maybe you can say something about that for people who are not so much in the recycling topic, and because Most of the people think of plastics when they think of recycling or biodegradable plastics, but I've never heard about aluminium in this context, actually.
So for good reasons, our industry, the flexible packaging industry, has introduced specifications like, for example, a printed polyester film, an aluminum foil of just a few micron as a barrier in the middle, and then a polyolefin as a sealant material to give technically the perfect packaging. And aluminum is the only material giving more or less endless barrier. Beyond a certain thickness, there is absolute no migration of neither oxygen, nor aroma, nor water vapor through aluminum. That you can not achieve with plastics. You have always a very small, measurable barrier. So that means for normal consumer goods with our monomaterials, where we have in the meantime values very close to aluminum, but it's not zero, the barrier. Yeah? So we have some migration through plastics. And for most applications, that's sufficient. But if you look to pharmaceutical packaging, which are doing also, if you look to packaging with very long shelf life, if you look, for example, for the food in the military section, which has to last several years, such shelf lives you can only achieve with aluminum. Besides of that, aluminum, due to the high stiffness, foldability for wrappers, is also a good material to be used if you look at the Easter Bunny wrappers, Santa Claus wrappers, and so on, that you can hardly do with other materials.
And this can be recycled nowadays, or is it also a problem to recycle it?
It can be perfectly recycled since it's around 90% of aluminum. There's just a thin printing layer on it. And yeah, these wrappers are just a few microns thick. So in total, it's a material efficient and recyclable option in these applications.
It's really interesting because we were talking about plastic recycling all the time, but we never talked about aluminium recycling.
But I remember that aluminium is a very good barrier function, and I think the minimal was 7 micron before you get to the pinhole situation, and the barrier function deteriorates. Is this correct, Achim?
Yes, that's roughly the limit. Films below that, maybe 6 micron, but below that you have the risk to create pinholes, and then you have also a certain barrier loss. And which is then increasing with decreasing packaging thickness.
Is there something else that you would like to say or add to what we discussed today?
Yeah, we have now some years of experience in optimizing our monomaterials, and especially with our Ecolam, the mono PE structures. We are already qualified in dozens of projects with also the biggest brand owners here. And our challenge is always to make these new recyclable structures running on existing equipment at the used packaging speed. That is a must. And in many cases, we can achieve that, or in most cases, we can achieve that by creating also a higher temperature resistance on the outside and a lower sealing point on the inside. You need always a certain sealing window. But it is clear, a monopolyolefin structure never can have the thermal resistance on the outside towards the sealing bar as a polyester laminate or a laminate with paper as external layer. And in some challenging sealing conditions, if I think about spouts, if I think about overlapping seals, we need also, even if most brand owners are not keen to do so, we need also to consider a modification of the machinery. And here, a technology like the Vatron technology, the digital sealing comes into the game and can surely help a lot to increase the efficiency, even in complex sealing situations for the new monomaterial packaging.
We only agree to that, of course. But, that's
I can imagine.
That's a fact that we've identified as well in the market. And if we want to be able, if everybody needs to have their packaging suitable for the next challenges for the next decade for monomaterials, there is something they need to adapt on their lines. So that's for sure. Yeah. I think this wraps up this episode of Packolution. I'd like to thank you on behalf of my colleagues, Achim, for your insight and your color on the topics, which I think will answer a lot of questions from our listeners. And hopefully we stay in touch and we will follow you on LinkedIn as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.